With front and rear gearboxes complete, along with the centre differential, it's time to start building out and adding more to the gearboxes, and so it's on to Bag E, rear end assembly. With this bag we are looking at the rear assembly, so we'll need to work with the rear gearbox section we've built from the previous bag, and with that to hand we can go ahead and empty the contents of Bag E. In this bag we have our rear arms, albeit with less tunability than the electric buggy for instance, but still very rigid and of a high quality too, which make them perfect for the abuse that a short course truck is likely to endure. We also have our 2.1mm sway bar, along with all the sway bar mounting parts and other general hardware. So with that said, we'll start with the inner hinge pin brace. Plastic in construction and no inserts to install here either, so little by means of customizability, although that sits straight onto the rear gearbox just under the rear drive shaft and is secured with two 14mm button head screws, again only until snug. Double check orientation here, the two outer holes should be facing inwards towards the gearbox so that the hinge pins can sit inside. With that said, we'll move across to our first arm now, where we insert the 10mm droop screw into the inner centre, followed by the hinge pin itself straight through the larger end, and seat into position, into the hinge pin brace we just installed, pushing the hinge pin right back into the brace. No reaming required and the arm should be relatively free moving. Repeat with the second arm, so 10mm droop screw, hinge pin, before securing to the opposite side. Take care with orientation here, the recess in the arm should be on the same side as the shock standoffs. We can now secure by covering with the outer hinge pin brace, taking care to capture the hinge pins while doing so, along with a single 10mm button head screw. This is a placeholder screw, so there's no need to tighten this screw right down. It's just being used to hold everything in place for the moment, and we will be removing and replacing this later in the build. And that's our arms installed. Notice how free these are, no reaming required at all. Okay, so now we can concentrate on installation of the sway bar. Start by inserting the two plastic spacers into the rear of the gearbox, before feeding the sway bar through, and then insert a sway bar screw mount onto each end and down towards the centre. After which we can insert set screws into both. Don't tighten down just yet, we need to make sure the sway bar is as centered as possible, so let's get the other ends into position first. To do that we need to grab our sway bar linkage and insert a pivot ball into each end, one with just the ball, and one end has a small collar. Repeat with the second linkage arm too. Insert one end of the sway bar into the collared pivot ball and use a set screw to secure down into position, along with a little thread lock applied too, before placing the other end of the linkage into the suspension arm and securing into position by inserting an 18mm cap-head screw through the arm and the pivot ball, securing it into place. Repeat the same process on the other side, securing the sway bar into position. All that's left is to place on a flat surface, ensuring the sway bar is as centered as possible, and tighten down the two sway bar screw mounts we left loose earlier, now securing it into place. And that's the rear end assembly and Bag E complete. The vehicle is starting to take shape nicely now, and although we're 5 bags in, everything has pieced together with perfection, no issues at all. Don't put this to one side just yet though, as we'll continue to build on this with Kit Bag F, containing the rear hubs and camber links.